My name is Jade Thompson, and I'm 27 years old. Last Tuesday evening, I was sitting in my luxury downtown Seattle condo when my father called. We talked about Mom's latest medical bills, and I assured him I'd help cover the costs like always. Then he said goodbye, but something went wrong with his phone. He didn't hang up. That's when I heard him talking to my stepmother Brenda. His words cut through me like a knife. Jade's just a burden now, draining our savings for her mother's medical bills. I'm tired of her constant demands. I stayed frozen, listening to every devastating word they exchanged about how I was nothing but a financial leech. Before we dive into what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life family drama. Trust me, what I discovered about my stepmother's true plans will shock you to your core. Now, let me tell you how this phone call changed everything. Growing up, I thought I was living the American dream, even after tragedy struck our family. When I was 10 years old, my mother Linda was diagnosed with breast cancer. The treatments were expensive, but my father Richard seemed devoted to getting her the best care possible. Everything changed when he remarried my stepmother Brenda just 2 years later, while Mom was still fighting for her life. Brenda presented herself as a caring woman who wanted to help our family through difficult times, and I believed her completely. From the moment Brenda entered our lives, I felt this overwhelming pressure to prove I wasn't a burden to our newly blended family. I started working at 14, first babysitting neighborhood kids, then taking on retail jobs throughout high school. Every penny I earned went toward helping with Mom's medical expenses. While my classmates worried about prom dresses and college applications, I was calculating how many hours I needed to work to cover Mom's next chemotherapy session. Brenda would always praise my maturity and responsibility, telling Dad how lucky he was to have such a dedicated daughter. College was a juggling act of scholarships, student loans, and working 25 hours a week at a local real estate office. That job changed my life because I discovered I had a natural talent for connecting with people and understanding property values. My boss, Mrs. Patterson, became a mentor who encouraged me to pursue real estate after graduation. She saw something in me that I didn't even recognize at the time, a fierce determination to create financial security for my family. By age 25, I had built a successful real estate career in Seattle's competitive market. Last year alone, I closed deals worth over $3 million in total value. My commission checks were substantial, and I felt proud that I could finally provide the kind of support my family needed. When Dad called 3 months ago asking for $50,000 for emergency roof repairs on their house, I didn't hesitate to transfer the money within hours. Brenda sent me a heartfelt thank you card, writing about how grateful she was to have me as a stepdaughter. My relationship with Mom remained my anchor through everything. She had survived the cancer but required ongoing monitoring and occasional treatments that insurance only partially covered. I had moved her to a beautiful assisted living facility called Sunset Manor, where she received excellent care. Every Sunday, I would visit her, and we'd spend hours talking about books, gardening, and her dreams of traveling again once her health improved. She never asked me for money directly, but I knew the facility cost $3,000 monthly, and Dad's contribution had been decreasing steadily over the past year. My boyfriend Marcus, whom I'd been dating for 2 years, often commented on the family dynamics during holiday gatherings. He noticed how Brenda would subtly redirect conversations away from Mom's health updates and how she'd change the subject whenever I mentioned visiting Mom. "Something feels off about how your stepmother treats your mother's memory," he told me after last Christmas dinner. I defended Brenda, explaining that it was probably difficult for her to hear about Dad's first wife's ongoing health struggles. The Christmas gathering next month was supposed to be special because Mom's doctors had cleared her to leave the facility for a few hours to join us. I had been planning this reunion for weeks, coordinating with her medical team and arranging transportation. Brenda seemed enthusiastic about the idea, even suggesting we order Mom's favorite catered meal from the Italian restaurant she loved. Everything appeared perfect on the surface, but that phone call shattered every assumption I had about my place in this family. Looking back now, I realize how carefully I had constructed my identity around being the perfect daughter who never complained, never asked for anything, and always stepped up when money was needed. I thought my sacrifices were appreciated, that my hard work was building a stronger family foundation. The brutal truth I learned that Tuesday evening was that my stepmother saw every dollar I contributed as proof of my neediness, and my father had begun viewing my mother's medical expenses as my personal responsibility rather than a shared family obligation. That phone call haunted me for 3 sleepless nights before I decided I needed to know the truth about my family's financial situation. If I was really such a burden, then perhaps I was missing some crucial information about their circumstances. I started by reviewing my own bank records, looking at every transfer I had made to help with family expenses over the past 2 years. The numbers were staggering: $87,000 in direct transfers, plus another $15,000 in expenses I had covered directly by paying contractors, medical facilities, and other service providers. The breakthrough came when I decided to drive past Dad and Brenda's house on Thursday afternoon. Sitting in their driveway was a brand new luxury recreational vehicle worth at least $60,000. The dealer sticker was still attached to the windshield, and I could see temporary registration papers on the dashboard. My hands trembled as I realized where my emergency repair money had actually gone. There was no roof damage, no urgent maintenance crisis. My $50,000 had been used to purchase a vacation RV while I believed I was helping prevent their home from falling apart. I called Mom that evening, trying to keep my voice steady as I asked carefully worded questions about Dad's recent visits and any conversations they'd had about finances. What she told me made my stomach drop. "Honey, your father hasn't visited me in over 2 months," she said quietly. The last time he came, Brenda was with him, and she kept checking her phone and sighing like she wanted to leave. When I mentioned that my arthritis medication was getting expensive, Brenda said something about how I should consider whether all these treatments were really necessary at my age. The next morning, I contacted Dr. Harrison, who had been Mom's oncologist during her cancer treatment and still served as her primary care physician. Dr. Harrison had known our family for over 15 years and had always been straightforward about Mom's medical needs and prognosis. When I explained my concerns about family communications regarding Mom's care, his response chilled me. "Jade, I'm glad you called. About 6 weeks ago, your stepmother scheduled a private appointment with me to discuss your mother's condition. She asked very specific questions about life expectancy and whether I thought your mother's quality of life justified the ongoing medical expenses." Dr. Harrison continued, "I found her questions inappropriate and told her that those decisions belonged to your mother and her immediate family, meaning you." She seemed frustrated by my response and asked if there were any scenarios where medical professionals might recommend discontinuing certain treatments to allow for a more natural progression. I documented our conversation because it raised red flags about potential elder abuse or coercion. That weekend, I decided to visit Uncle Frank, Dad's older brother who lived about an hour outside Seattle. Frank had always been the family truth-teller, someone who spoke his mind regardless of social consequences. When I explained what I had discovered about the RV purchase and Brenda's meeting with Dr. Harrison, Frank's expression grew dark. "Jade, I've been worried about your father for months. The last few times we talked, he seemed different, more isolated. He canceled our usual fishing trips and stopped returning my calls promptly. When I asked him directly if everything was okay, he said Brenda thought he spent too much time dwelling on old family obligations and needed to focus on building their future together." Frank revealed that he had tried to discuss Mom's situation with Dad during a brief phone call in September. "Your father told me that you had taken over responsibility for your mother's care and that he felt relieved not to have that financial pressure anymore." But the way he said it sounded rehearsed, like he was repeating something he'd been told rather than expressing his own feelings. When I suggested that Linda deserved ongoing support from him regardless of their divorce, he got defensive and said I didn't understand how much stress the medical bills had been causing in his marriage. By Sunday evening, I had compiled enough evidence to understand that my stepmother had been systematically manipulating Dad's perspective on both Mom and me for months, possibly years. She had convinced him that my financial contributions were a sign of my excessive demands rather than my willingness to help. She had researched ways to minimize or eliminate Mom's medical expenses, potentially endangering Mom's health to reduce costs. Most disturbing, she had positioned herself as Dad's protector against his burdensome first family while simultaneously benefiting from the money I provided. I realized I was facing a calculated campaign to isolate Dad from his previous family commitments and redirect his resources toward Brenda's priorities. The question was whether to confront this situation directly or gather more evidence before taking action. Marcus advised caution, suggesting that direct confrontation might cause Dad to become even more defensive and give Brenda an opportunity to accelerate whatever timeline she was following. That night, I made the decision to continue investigating while maintaining the appearance of normal family relationships. Over the next 2 weeks, I conducted what felt like a forensic investigation into 5 years of family interactions, and what I discovered was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation. I started by going through old emails, text messages, and social media posts to identify patterns in how Brenda communicated about Mom and me. The evolution was subtle but unmistakable. In early messages from 2019, Brenda wrote warmly about supporting Linda through her health challenges and praised my dedication to family. By 2022, her language had shifted to phrases like managing Linda's ongoing needs and references to my financial involvement in family matters. I found a particularly revealing email thread from last year where Brenda had forwarded medical bills to Dad with her own commentary. Instead of simply sharing the information, she had added notes like, another expensive test that insurance barely covers, and Linda's doctors seem to find new problems every visit. She systematically reframed Mom's legitimate medical care as excessive and questionable, planting seeds of doubt about whether the treatments were truly necessary or if medical providers were taking advantage of our family's willingness to pay. The most damaging discovery came when I accessed Mom's email account with her permission to help organize her medical records. Hidden among routine correspondence, I found several messages from Brenda that Mom had never mentioned to me. These emails, sent over the past 8 months, contained increasingly hostile content. Brenda had written things like, Richard is feeling overwhelmed by the constant financial pressure from your medical situation, and perhaps it's time to consider whether all these treatments are really improving your quality of life or just prolonging suffering. When I showed these emails to Mom, she broke down crying. I didn't want to worry you with Brenda's messages, she admitted. I thought maybe she was just frustrated about money and didn't mean to sound so harsh. But lately, her emails made me feel like I was being selfish for wanting to stay healthy and active. I even asked Dr. Harrison if my treatments were really necessary or if I was being a burden to my family. I decided to test Dad's current mindset by calling him with a reasonable request. I explained that Mom's facility was offering a new physical therapy program that could significantly improve her mobility and independence, but it would cost an additional $500 monthly for 6 months. His response revealed how thoroughly Brenda had influenced his thinking. Jade, I appreciate everything you do for your mother, but don't you think we're reaching a point where we need to accept natural limitations? Brenda and I have been discussing how these endless medical expenses might be preventing your mother from finding peace with her current situation. When I pressed him for clarification, Dad's words sounded like a script Brenda had written. He talked about enabling dependency, and suggested that my financial support was actually interfering with your mother's acceptance of her circumstances. He even questioned whether the assisted living facility was encouraging unnecessary treatments to increase their revenue. These were not thoughts or concerns Dad had ever expressed during the previous 15 years of Mom's health challenges. My attempt to reason with Dad backfired completely. After our conversation, he apparently reported our discussion to Brenda, who immediately went on the offensive. Within days, I received concerned messages from family friends asking about rumors they had heard about my relationship with Dad and Brenda. Someone had told them that I was pressuring Dad for money and taking advantage of his generous nature to fund excessive medical treatments for Mom. Brenda's whisper campaign extended beyond our immediate circle. I discovered she had contacted my real estate broker, claiming to be concerned about family stress affecting Jade's professional judgment. She suggested that I might be experiencing financial pressure that could influence my client relationships. Fortunately, my broker dismissed these concerns, but the fact that Brenda was willing to potentially damage my career showed how far she would go to isolate and discredit me. The breaking point came when I learned that Brenda had scheduled another meeting with Dr. Harrison, this time claiming to represent both Dad and me in discussions about transitioning Linda to comfort care only. Dr. Harrison called me immediately to verify this authorization, which I obviously had not given. When I confronted Dad about this misrepresentation, he seemed genuinely confused and said Brenda had told him I was too emotional to handle medical discussions rationally, so she had volunteered to serve as family spokesperson to reduce my stress. Marcus witnessed one of my phone calls with Dad and afterward said, "Jade, your father is not the same person I met 2 years ago. It's like someone has systematically rewired his thinking about his own family. This isn't just about money, it's about completely redefining his relationships and responsibilities." I realized that Brenda hadn't simply convinced Dad that Mom and I were financial burdens. She had constructed an entirely new narrative where she was protecting him from manipulation by his previous family. On a cold Monday morning in late October, I received the call I had been dreading for years. Mom had been rushed to the emergency room after collapsing in her assisted living facility. Her potassium levels had dropped dangerously low, causing cardiac irregularities that required immediate intervention. The emergency room physician explained that she needed to be admitted for at least 3 days of monitoring and treatment, with potential additional procedures depending on test results. Even with insurance, the estimated out-of-pocket costs would exceed $12,000. I immediately called Dad to inform him about Mom's hospitalization and the urgent need for medical decisions. His response was so cold and detached that I barely recognized his voice. "Jade, I think you need to accept that your mother is 73 years old and these health crises are going to become more frequent. Brenda and I have discussed this possibility, and we believe it might be time to consider whether aggressive interventions are really in Linda's best interest." When I asked what he meant by aggressive interventions, he said that Brenda had researched alternatives to prolonging the inevitable and suggested we explore comfort care options instead of expensive treatments. The conversation with Dad left me shaking with rage and disbelief. Mom's condition was completely treatable with proper medical care, and her quality of life before this emergency had been excellent. She was actively engaged in book clubs, garden planning for spring, and had been looking forward to Christmas with the family. The idea that a temporary medical emergency should be treated as a reason to abandon all care was not only medically inappropriate but morally unconscionable. I spent the next 18 hours at the hospital, coordinating with doctors and making financial arrangements to cover Mom's treatment costs. This required liquidating my investment accounts and transferring money from my emergency savings. While I was handling these logistics, I received a text message from Brenda expressing sympathy for this difficult time and suggesting that sometimes accepting natural transitions is the most loving choice we can make. The timing and content of her message made it clear that she viewed Mom's medical emergency as an opportunity rather than a crisis. The situation became even more disturbing when Mom's primary nurse, Patricia, pulled me aside for a private conversation. Patricia had worked at the hospital for over 20 years and had seen numerous family dynamics during medical emergencies. "Miss Thompson, I need to make you aware of something unusual that happened yesterday. A woman claiming to be your mother's daughter-in-law called our unit asking about your mother's condition and requesting information about advance directives and do not resuscitate orders. When I explained that we could only discuss those matters with immediate family or designated healthcare proxies, she became insistent that your father had given her authority to make medical decisions." Patricia continued, "I asked her to have your father call directly to clarify the authorization, but instead she started asking hypothetical questions about what would happen if the family decided not to pursue extraordinary measures for someone your mother's age. Her questions were very specific and seemed focused on scenarios where treatment might be discontinued. I documented our conversation and flagged your mother's chart to ensure that any changes to her care plan require direct consultation with you as her primary emergency contact." That afternoon, I discovered the most chilling evidence yet of Brenda's intentions. While cleaning out Mom's purse to find her insurance cards, I found a folder containing printed information about dignified end-of-life options and making peace with natural death. The materials had clearly been placed there recently, and they included handwritten notes in Brenda's distinctive script. One note read, "When ready, discuss with Richard about letting Linda transition peacefully without prolonging her suffering." Another note listed local hospice organizations and their contact information. When I confronted Mom about these materials, she looked confused and frightened. Brenda gave me that folder last month when she visited, Mom explained. She said it was important information that all seniors should have in case of emergencies. She told me that sometimes families make the mistake of pursuing expensive treatments that only create more suffering, and that the most loving thing is to allow natural transitions. I didn't understand why she was giving me this information since I'm not terminally ill, but I didn't want to seem ungrateful. The next morning brought an even more disturbing revelation. Harrison called to inform me that someone had attempted to modify Mom's advance directive paperwork at his office. Yesterday afternoon, a woman identifying herself as Brenda Thompson presented documents claiming to update your mother's healthcare preferences. The forms requested changes to make comfort care the default option and listed your father as the primary decision-maker rather than you. Our office manager immediately recognized this as suspicious because your mother had never mentioned wanting to make these changes, and we require in-person verification for any modifications to advance directives. Dr. Harrison explained that when his staff questioned the authenticity of the request, Brenda became defensive and claimed that Mom was too confused to make rational medical decisions and that the family had agreed Dad should take over healthcare responsibilities. I called your mother directly to verify, and she was completely coherent and adamant that she had not requested any changes to her advance directives. She was quite distressed to learn that someone had attempted to alter her medical preferences without her knowledge or consent. That evening, I had a direct confrontation with Brenda when she appeared at the hospital claiming to visit Mom. She arrived with flowers and a concerned expression, but when she realized I was present, her demeanor changed immediately. "Jade, I know this is difficult for you, but you need to start thinking about what's really best for Linda instead of just throwing money at every medical problem. Your father and I are concerned that you're not accepting the reality of her age and condition." When I challenged her about the advance directive fraud attempt, Brenda's mask slipped completely. "Someone needs to make rational decisions in this family," she snapped. "Your father is too emotional about his ex-wife to think clearly, and you're too selfish to consider anything except keeping her alive regardless of the cost or her quality of life. I was trying to help everyone by organizing proper end-of-life planning before the next crisis happens." Her words revealed a calculating coldness that made me realize I was dealing with someone who viewed Mom's life as an obstacle to be eliminated rather than a person deserving protection and care. While Mom recovered in the hospital, I decided to investigate whether Brenda's manipulation extended beyond medical and financial matters into legal territory. My suspicions were confirmed when I contacted the family attorney, Mr. Whitfield, who had handled Dad's legal affairs for over 15 years. Initially, Mr. Whitfield seemed hesitant to discuss Dad's recent legal activity, but when I explained the medical crisis and concerns about potential elder abuse, he agreed to meet privately to discuss general estate planning principles that might be relevant to our situation. The meeting with Mr. Whitfield revealed the scope of Brenda's long-term planning. 6 months ago, Dad had requested a complete revision of his will and estate planning documents. The original will, created shortly after he married Brenda, had left 40% of his assets to me, 30% to Mom for her ongoing care, and 30% to Brenda. The new will eliminated both Mom and me entirely, leaving everything to Brenda with a notation claiming this change was necessary due to undue influence and financial irresponsibility by beneficiaries who had demonstrated poor judgment in money management. Mr. Whitfield explained that he had questioned the dramatic changes and suggested Dad take time to reconsider such significant modifications. Your father seemed conflicted about the changes but insisted they were necessary to protect his assets from being wasted on endless medical expenses and to prevent his estate from being depleted by family members who had become financially dependent. These weren't phrases your father had ever used before, and they seemed inconsistent with his previous values and priorities. The attorney revealed that Brenda had accompanied Dad to every meeting about the will changes and had provided detailed written justifications for each modification. She had compiled a file of documentation claiming to show my excessive financial demands and Mom's unnecessary medical expenses as evidence that leaving assets to us would be irresponsible. Mrs. Thompson presented what appeared to be a carefully constructed case for why traditional family inheritance would be inappropriate in your father's specific circumstances, Mr. Whitfield said. Even more troubling was Brenda's insistence on including a no contest clause in the new will. This provision would disinherit anyone who challenged the will's validity, effectively preventing legal recourse even if the changes resulted from undue influence or coercion. Mr. Whitfield had strongly advised against this clause, but Brenda had researched legal precedents and convinced Dad that it was necessary to prevent costly and divisive family litigation after his death. The investigation took a shocking turn when I contacted Uncle Frank with questions about family legal history. Frank revealed that Dad had confided serious doubts about the will changes during a brief conversation in August. "Your father called me late one evening, and he sounded distressed," Frank explained. "He said he was concerned about decisions he was being pressured to make regarding his estate, but when I asked for details, he said Brenda was helping him see clearly about family financial dynamics he had been naive about before." Frank had tried to arrange an in-person meeting to discuss Dad's concerns, but subsequent calls had gone unanswered. "The last time we spoke, your father seemed like a different person," Frank said. "He talked about feeling trapped by family obligations and said Brenda had helped him realize he needed to protect himself from people who only valued him for financial support. It was like listening to someone recite talking points rather than expressing genuine feelings." Uncle Frank's most disturbing revelation concerned Brenda's personal history. "I did some research after noticing changes in your father's behavior," he admitted. Brenda's previous marriage ended when her husband died suddenly after changing his will to leave everything to her. His adult children from his first marriage contested the will, claiming their father had been manipulated, but they lost because he was declared mentally competent when he made the changes. The parallels between Brenda's previous situation and her current manipulation of Dad were unmistakable. In both cases, she had isolated an older man from his previous family relationships, convinced him that his children were financial burdens, and positioned herself as his protector against exploitation. The first husband had died within 18 months of changing his will, leaving Brenda with substantial assets and no ongoing family obligations. When I shared these discoveries with Marcus, he immediately suggested hiring a private investigator to research Brenda's background more thoroughly. "Jade, if she's done this before, there might be a pattern of behavior that could help protect your father and potentially reverse some of the legal changes," he said. That evening, I contacted a recommended private investigation firm and explained the situation. The investigator, Ms. Rodriguez, specializes in elder abuse cases and agreed to conduct a comprehensive background check on Brenda's financial and relationship history. Ms. Rodriguez's preliminary findings were alarming. Brenda had been married 3 times, and each marriage had ended with significant financial benefit to her. The first husband had died in a car accident, but not before changing his will and life insurance beneficiaries. The second husband, whose case Uncle Frank had discovered, died of a heart attack. In both cases, Brenda had isolated her husband from his previous family and systematically assumed control over financial decision-making in the months before their deaths. The investigator also discovered that Brenda had substantial debts that predated her marriage to Dad. She owed over $40,000 in credit card debt and had defaulted on a previous home mortgage. Her marriage to Dad had immediately improved her financial situation, and the timing of various expensive purchases correlated with my financial contributions to family expenses. It became clear that my money was essentially subsidizing Brenda's lifestyle while she simultaneously worked to eliminate me from Dad's inheritance plans. Armed with evidence of Brenda's systematic manipulation and potential fraud, I developed a comprehensive strategy to expose her activities while protecting both Dad and Mom from further harm. The plan required patience and precise timing because direct confrontation could cause Dad to become more defensive and accelerate whatever timeline Brenda was following. My real estate expertise had taught me that the most successful negotiations happen when you understand all parties' motivations and prepare multiple scenarios before revealing your position. The first phase involved using my professional network to gather additional financial intelligence about Brenda's activities. Through industry connections, I discovered that Brenda had been consulting with financial advisors about managing inherited assets and had inquired about investment strategies for windfall income expected within the next year. She had also researched procedures for selling real estate quickly and minimizing tax implications of large asset transfers. These consultations suggested she was actively planning for Dad's death and preparing to liquidate his assets rapidly. My partnership with Uncle Frank proved crucial for documenting Dad's baseline personality and values before Brenda's influence became dominant. Frank provided written statements about Dad's historical attitudes toward family obligations, his previous devotion to Mom's care, and his pride in my professional achievements. We also compiled photographs and documentation from family events showing Dad's genuine happiness during interactions with Mom and me, contrasting sharply with his recent behavior and statements. Marcus contributed technical expertise by helping me set up secure documentation systems for evidence collection. We created encrypted digital files containing correspondence, financial records, legal documents, and witness statements. Marcus also researched legal requirements for proving undue influence in inheritance cases and identified specific types of evidence that would be most compelling in potential court proceedings. The breakthrough came when Patricia, Mom's nurse, agreed to cooperate with our investigation. Patricia had witnessed several concerning interactions between Brenda and medical staff and was willing to provide formal statements about Brenda's attempts to influence Mom's care decisions. "I've seen elder abuse before, and this situation has all the warning signs," Patricia explained. "Your stepmother's behavior around your mother's medical care is not that of a concerned family member. It's calculating and focused on outcomes rather than your mother's well-being." Dr. Harrison also agreed to document his professional observations about Brenda's inappropriate medical inquiries and the attempted advance directive fraud. He provided detailed records of their conversations and expressed willingness to testify about behavior patterns he considered inconsistent with genuine family concern. In 30 years of practice, I've learned to recognize when someone is asking about a patient's condition out of caring versus when they're seeking information to make decisions that aren't in the patient's best interest, he stated. Brenda's growing suspicion about my sudden cooperation created an opportunity to test her reactions and gather additional evidence. I began expressing artificial enthusiasm about her suggestions regarding Mom's care and made comments about accepting reality regarding medical expenses. Brenda responded by becoming more open about her true opinions and timeline for resolving what she called the Linda situation. She even suggested that I should consider encouraging Mom to move to a less expensive care facility to reduce financial pressure on the family. The private investigator's expanded background check revealed the most damning evidence yet. Ms. Rodriguez discovered that Brenda had researched inheritance law extensively before marrying Dad, focusing specifically on strategies for minimizing previous family claims on assets. She had also consulted with lawyers about protecting spousal interests in cases involving stepchildren and former spouses with ongoing financial needs. This research had begun before she even married Dad, suggesting that manipulating his estate planning was part of her original intention. Most significantly, the investigation uncovered evidence of insurance fraud in Brenda's past. During her second marriage, she had filed claims for expensive jewelry and electronics that were allegedly stolen, but police reports suggested the thefts had never occurred. Although charges were never filed due to insufficient evidence, the pattern of questionable insurance claims provided insight into her willingness to commit fraud for financial gain. By November, I had compiled enough evidence to approach law enforcement about potential elder abuse and fraud. However, I decided that family intervention might be more effective than criminal prosecution in protecting Dad and preserving some possibility of repairing our relationship. The key was presenting evidence in a way that helped Dad recognize the manipulation without making him feel humiliated or defensive about having been deceived. The final preparation involved selling my downtown condo to demonstrate my commitment to fighting for my family's protection regardless of personal cost. The property sale would also provide liquid assets necessary to fund comprehensive legal action if family intervention proved unsuccessful. I listed the condo for $980,000. But strong market conditions and multiple offers drove the final sale price to $1,050,000. The decision to sell my downtown Seattle condo was both strategic and emotionally devastating. This property represented 6 years of hard work, careful financial planning, and my vision of building a stable foundation for my future with Marcus. The 2-bedroom unit on the 15th floor offered stunning views of Elliott Bay and had been my sanctuary during stressful periods of building my real estate career. However, I realized that protecting my family's well-being was more important than maintaining my personal comfort or financial security. I listed the property on a Tuesday morning in early November, working with a colleague who specialized in luxury condominiums. The Seattle real estate market was experiencing high demand for downtown units, and we priced the condo competitively at $978,000 to generate immediate interest. Within 24 hours, we had received 3 serious inquiries and scheduled multiple showings for the weekend. The response exceeded our expectations dramatically. By the following Monday, we had received 6 written offers ranging from the asking price to $1,030,000. A bidding war developed between 2 particularly motivated buyers, ultimately driving the final accepted offer to $1,050,000. The buyers requested a quick closing, which aligned perfectly with my need for rapid access to liquid assets. News of my property sale spread quickly through our family network, creating exactly the reaction I had anticipated. Dad called within hours of the sale becoming public record, expressing confusion and concern about why I would sell my dream home so suddenly. His questions revealed how completely Brenda had poisoned his perception of my financial judgment and priorities. "Jade, Brenda is worried that you might be experiencing money problems and making impulsive decisions," he said. "She's concerned that you've been overextending yourself financially to cover your mother's expenses." I used Dad's concern as an opportunity to plant seeds of doubt about Brenda's narrative regarding my financial motivations. "Dad, I sold my condo because I have more important priorities than expensive real estate," I explained. "I want to make sure Mom receives the best possible care regardless of cost, and I also want to ensure our family relationships are based on genuine caring rather than financial manipulation." My response was carefully designed to contrast my willingness to sacrifice for family with Brenda's focus on eliminating expenses. Brenda's reaction to my property sale revealed the extent of her panic about losing control over the family financial narrative. She immediately began spreading a new version of events, claiming that my condo sale proved I had been living beyond my means, and using family contributions to support an unsustainable lifestyle. She told mutual friends that she was worried about Jade's mental state and suggested that grief over Mom's condition was causing me to make irrational financial decisions. The sale proceeds gave me the resources to retain the best possible legal representation for protecting Dad's interests and potentially challenging the fraudulent changes. I contacted Morrison and Associates, a firm specializing in elder law and estate disputes, and explained the comprehensive evidence I had gathered about Brenda's manipulation. Lead attorney Sarah Morrison reviewed the documentation and confirmed that we had strong grounds for legal action on multiple fronts. Morrison's team included not only estate lawyers but also specialists in financial elder abuse and fraud investigation. They recommended hiring additional expert witnesses, including geriatric psychiatrists who could evaluate whether Dad's recent decisions reflected genuine free will or the result of psychological manipulation. "Your stepmother's behavior fits classic patterns of financial predation against elderly individuals," Morrison explained. "The systematic isolation, gradual assumption of decision-making authority, and legal changes that benefit only her while eliminating previous family relationships are textbook examples of undue influence." With legal representation secured, I authorized Ms. Rodriguez to expand her investigation into Brenda's background and current activities. The enhanced investigation revealed that Brenda had been researching managing inheritance and asset liquidation strategies much more extensively than initially discovered. She had consulted with 3 different financial advisors about strategies for quickly converting real estate and other assets into liquid investments that would be easier to relocate or hide if necessary. The investigator also uncovered evidence that Brenda had been monitoring my bank accounts and financial activities through methods that bordered on illegal surveillance. She had somehow gained access to information about my real estate commissions and had been tracking my expenditures to build her case that I was financially irresponsible and demanding. This surveillance explained how she had been able to predict my financial contributions and time her manipulation efforts for maximum impact. Uncle Frank played a crucial role during this phase by maintaining regular contact with Dad while carefully gathering information about Brenda's daily activities and conversations. Frank reported that Dad had begun expressing confusion about why I would sell my condo and whether he had somehow misunderstood my financial situation. "Your father seems genuinely puzzled by your decision," Frank explained. "He's starting to question some of the things Brenda has told him about your motivations and spending habits." Most importantly, Frank observed that Dad's personality was beginning to re-emerge as he spent time away from Brenda's constant influence during Frank's visits. "When we talk one-on-one, your father sounds more like himself," Frank noted. "He asks questions about you and your mother that suggest he still cares deeply but feels confused about how to balance his obligations to his current wife with his feelings about his previous family." The combination of legal pressure, financial resources, and family support created the foundation for a coordinated intervention designed to break Brenda's psychological hold over Dad and expose her fraudulent activities. However, I knew that timing would be crucial because Brenda was clearly accelerating her timeline in response to my increased activity and the threat posed by my newfound financial independence. The intervention required careful orchestration to present overwhelming evidence while providing Dad with emotional support to process the reality of 5 years of systematic manipulation. Uncle Frank arranged a family gathering at his home on a Saturday afternoon in mid-December, ostensibly to discuss holiday plans and Mom's improving health. He invited Dad and Brenda separately, ensuring they would arrive before I did and feel comfortable in the familiar setting. I arrived an hour after Dad and Brenda, accompanied by Sarah Morrison and Ms. Rodriguez, who introduced themselves as professionals helping with family documentation and planning. The initial atmosphere was tense but not immediately hostile because Brenda assumed this was another family meeting where she could control the narrative about financial responsibilities and medical decisions. The presentation began with Frank sharing his concerns about changes in Dad's behavior and decision-making over the past year. "Richard, I've known you for 62 years, and I've watched you become someone I don't recognize," Frank said gently but firmly. "The brother I grew up with would never abandon his ex-wife during a medical crisis or question his daughter's character because she wanted to help her mother. I think someone has been influencing your thinking in ways that don't reflect your true values." Sarah Morrison then presented the legal documentation chronologically, starting with Dad's original will and estate planning documents from 2019, which clearly reflected his intention to provide for both Mom's ongoing care and my inheritance. She contrasted these documents with the recent changes, highlighting language and reasoning that was inconsistent with Dad's historical decision-making patterns and expressed values. When Morrison presented evidence of the attempted advance directive fraud, Dad's expression changed from defensive to confused to genuinely shocked. "Brenda, you told me that Jade had requested changes to her mother's medical directives because she was finding the decision-making responsibility too stressful," he said. Brenda's response was to claim that the medical staff had misunderstood her inquiries and that she was only trying to help organize proper end-of-life planning. The most devastating evidence came from the private investigator's comprehensive background report. Ms. Rodriguez presented detailed documentation of Brenda's previous marriages, focusing on the pattern of isolating elderly husbands from their families, assuming control over financial decisions, and benefiting substantially from convenient deaths after will changes. The similarities between her previous manipulations and her current treatment of Dad were undeniable. Dad's reaction to learning about Brenda's previous husband's suspicious death was profound and immediate. "You never told me that your second husband died so soon after changing his will," he said quietly. "You said he had been sick for years and that his children were estranged because of their own problems, not because of inheritance disputes." Brenda's attempts to explain away the coincidences became increasingly frantic and contradictory. The final piece of evidence was the audio recording from the original phone call where I had overheard Dad and Brenda discussing how I was just a burden, draining their savings. When the recording played Dad's voice repeating Brenda's talking points about my financial irresponsibility and Mom's excessive medical needs, he visibly recoiled. "That doesn't sound like me," he whispered. "Those aren't my words or my thoughts about my daughter." Brenda's response to being completely exposed revealed the calculating nature that had been hidden beneath 5 years of careful performance. Instead of expressing remorse or attempting to repair relationships, she immediately shifted to threats and accusations. She claimed that everyone present was conspiring against her and threatened to expose family secrets unless the intervention ended immediately. When these tactics failed, she threatened suicide and claimed that losing Dad would destroy her will to live. Sarah Morrison calmly explained that Brenda's threats were consistent with patterns observed in other elder abuse cases and that professional support was available to help her address any genuine mental health concerns. However, the primary focus needed to remain on protecting Dad from further manipulation and restoring his autonomy to make decisions based on accurate information rather than carefully constructed deceptions. The legal consequences were immediate and comprehensive. Morrison had prepared documentation for emergency restraining orders preventing Brenda from accessing Dad's financial accounts or making medical decisions on behalf of any family members. The fraudulent changes were challenged based on evidence of undue influence and coercion. Law enforcement was contacted regarding the attempted advance directive fraud and the pattern of financial manipulation. Dad's emotional reaction was heartbreaking to witness. "I don't understand how I could have been so blind," he kept repeating. "I said terrible things about my own daughter and abandoned Linda when she needed support. How could I have believed that Jade was trying to take advantage of me when she was sacrificing everything to help our family?" His grief over lost time and damaged relationships was genuine and profound. Uncle Frank provided crucial emotional support during Dad's initial processing of the revelation. "Richard, you're not the first good man to be deceived by someone who studied your weaknesses and exploited your desire to be loved," Frank said. "The important thing now is rebuilding the relationships that matter and making sure Linda and Jade know that your temporary confusion doesn't reflect your permanent feelings about them." By the end of that afternoon, Brenda had been removed from the house and was facing both civil and criminal legal proceedings. Dad was beginning the difficult process of understanding how systematic psychological manipulation had altered his perceptions and decisions. Most importantly, the immediate threats to Mom's safety and my family relationships had been eliminated, though the healing process would require much more time and effort. 6 months have passed since that December afternoon when we exposed Brenda's years of manipulation, and the healing process has been more complex than I initially anticipated. Dad immediately sought counseling with a therapist who specializes in psychological manipulation and elder abuse recovery. Dr. Patricia Miles has helped him understand how gradually increasing isolation from family and friends had made him more vulnerable to Brenda's influence. The therapy sessions have been crucial for Dad's emotional recovery and his ability to rebuild trust in his own judgment. The legal proceedings concluded with significant consequences for Brenda. She pled guilty to attempted fraud regarding the advance directive modifications and agreed to a settlement that restored Dad's original estate planning documents. The criminal court sentenced her to 2 years of supervised probation and mandated restitution for the financial manipulation. Most importantly, she was permanently prohibited from contacting any members of our family or accessing Dad's financial resources. Rebuilding the father-daughter relationship has required patience and forgiveness from both directions. Dad has made full financial restitution for the money that was redirected to the luxury RV purchase, plus additional support to cover Mom's medical expenses that he had previously refused to help with. However, the more significant work has involved rebuilding emotional trust and communication patterns that Brenda had systematically undermined. Mom's health has improved dramatically now that she receives consistent medical care without the stress of family conflict over expenses. She was able to join us for Christmas dinner as originally planned, and seeing her laugh with Dad during our holiday gathering reminded everyone of the family bonds that Brenda had tried to destroy. Mom has also begun participating in a support group for family members affected by elder abuse, where her experience helps other people recognize manipulation tactics. I purchased a smaller but beautiful home just 15 minutes from Mom's assisted living facility, using the proceeds from my condo sale. The new house has a guest suite where Mom can stay during visits, and the garden space gives us a shared project that brings joy to both of us. While I initially regretted selling my downtown condo, I've realized that the new living arrangement better reflects my actual priorities and values. Marcus and I became engaged in February, and our experience navigating the family crisis together has strengthened our relationship in ways I never expected. He proposed with a speech about how watching me fight for my family's protection had shown him the kind of person he wanted to build a life with. Our wedding planning includes Mom as an active participant, fulfilling dreams that Brenda had tried to prevent. Dad has become an advocate for elder abuse awareness in our community, sharing his story with senior groups and family organizations. He speaks honestly about how intelligent, caring people can be manipulated by individuals who study their vulnerabilities and exploit their emotional needs. His willingness to discuss his experience publicly has helped other families recognize similar manipulation patterns before permanent damage occurs. The financial impact of fighting Brenda's manipulation was substantial, but the family relationships we preserved were worth every dollar spent on legal fees and investigation costs. My real estate business has grown stronger because clients appreciate working with someone who demonstrates genuine commitment to family values. Several referrals have come specifically from people who heard about how I sacrificed my own property to protect my family. Dr. Harrison implemented new protocols at his medical practice to prevent manipulation of patient care decisions by family members who don't have legitimate authority. His staff now requires additional verification for any requests to modify treatment plans or advance directives, and they document concerning family dynamics that might indicate elder abuse. These changes have already prevented similar manipulation attempts with other elderly patients. Uncle Frank has become the family historian, documenting our recovery process and maintaining connections that help prevent future isolation. His regular visits with Dad provide ongoing emotional support and serve as a check against any future manipulation attempts. Frank's loyalty during the crisis reminded all of us that family relationships require both love and vigilance to remain healthy. The most profound lesson from this experience is that family loyalty doesn't mean accepting abuse or manipulation, even when it comes from people we're supposed to trust. True family relationships are built on genuine care, mutual respect, and honest communication rather than obligation, guilt, or financial dependence. Sometimes protecting the people we love requires making difficult decisions and challenging behavior that seems normal but actually undermines family well-being. I've also learned that financial generosity without boundaries can enable manipulation rather than helping family members. Moving forward, I maintain clear expectations for how family financial support should be used, and I communicate directly with the people I'm trying to help rather than working through intermediaries who might have conflicting motivations. The experience has taught me to trust my instincts when family dynamics feel wrong, even if I can't immediately explain why certain behaviors seem inappropriate. Brenda's manipulation was subtle and gradual, but there were warning signs that I initially dismissed because I wanted to believe she cared about our family's well-being. Learning to recognize and respond to these warning signs could prevent similar manipulation in the future. As I reflect on everything that happened, I'm grateful that Mom's medical crisis created the urgency needed to expose Brenda's manipulation before she could complete her plans. If we had waited longer to investigate or confront the situation, the consequences could have been devastating for both Mom's health and Dad's financial security. Sometimes family crises, while painful, create opportunities to address underlying problems that might otherwise remain hidden until it's too late to fix them. Now I want to hear from all of you watching this story. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was manipulating your family relationships or financial decisions? How did you handle the situation, and what advice would you give to others facing similar challenges? Please share your experiences in the comments below because your stories could help other families recognize manipulation before it causes permanent damage. If this story resonated with you or reminded you of situations in your own family, please hit that like button to help more people find this content. Subscribe to the channel for more real-life family stories, and don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss an update. Share this video with friends or family members who might benefit from hearing about manipulation tactics and family protection strategies. Thank you for listening to my story with such attention and compassion. I hope that sharing these difficult experiences helps other families stay strong and united against people who would try to divide them for personal gain. Remember that protecting your family sometimes requires courage, sacrifice, and difficult confrontations, but the relationships you preserve are worth fighting for. Take care of yourselves and the people you love, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll explore more real stories about family challenges and triumph.